This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
We'd like to acknowledge the amazing creativity and tenacity of our show's producers, Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. Your thoughtful, topical, timely research and gentle handling of sensitive topics has made the fabric of our show much more than the sum of the individual episodes.
Thank you. We in turn would like to give a shout out to the hundreds of researchers and authors whose work we review.
And those who continue to build the many tools that we use to research, write, and produce Heliox.
Most importantly, we would like to thank our generous and thoughtful listeners, our Heliox community, for their feedback on the show's content and their financial and subscription support.
And we could not do this without you.
On with our review.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so you're looking to really get a handle on things quickly, right? Cut through the noise, get the real understanding, but without, getting totally bogged down.
Yeah, exactly. Not spending ages wading through stuff.
Well, that's perfect, because that's what we're doing today. We're taking a deep dive into Season 3 of the Heliox podcast.
Heliox. They position themselves as a place for, let me get this right, independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter.
That's quite a mission statement.
It really is a very comprehensive approach.
Definitely. And they seem serious about it. 73 episodes just in this latest season. That brings their total up to, 218?
Wow, yeah, they're prolific.
And their tagline, I think, sums up that balance we were talking about, where evidence meets empathy. It's about being thorough, but also, human-centered. They talk about wanting to lightly surface the big ideas.
Which sounds like exactly what our listeners are after, deep but not overwhelming.
Precisely. And what I found really interesting is how they approach these big ideas. They seem to have these 4 recurring perspective sort of lenses they look through.
Yeah, that's right. They work as these underlying frameworks for almost every conversation they have. Things like boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity.
Okay, hold on. Boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, take boundary dissolution. That might be looking at how lines are blurring, between, say, technology and biology, or even between different cultures online, how those merging areas create new challenges and possibilities.
Right, like things aren't in neat boxes anymore.
Exactly. And adaptive complexity, well, that's more about understanding how systems could be an ecosystem, could be the economy, could even be like a social movement, how they react and change, often in really unpredictable ways when something new happens.
Okay, gotcha. So these aren't just academic buzzwords. They're actual tools for looking at the world.
That's the idea, yeah. Frameworks for understanding. And if any of these frameworks themselves grab you, they often have related articles on their Substack.
Oh, cool. So you can dig deeper if you want to.
Exactly. Provides another layer for exploration.
Okay, so Season 3, 73 episodes. That's a lot to cover.
It is. So we've picked out a few highlights, episodes that seem to offer some really interesting nuggets, maybe some surprising perspectives.
Great. Where should we start?
How about this one from April 17th? The title alone is pretty catchy. The Quantum Secret of Life, How Your Cells Outperform Supercomputers.
Quantum in our cell. Okay, that sounds wild.
It kind of is. The episode dives into this cutting-edge science, suggesting that basic life processes, things happening in our cells right now, might actually be using quantum mechanics.
Like the weird physics stuff?
Things like photosynthesis, how plants convert light to energy so efficiently, or how enzymes speed up reactions. There's growing evidence that phenomena like quantum tunneling or coherence might be involved, allowing biology to do things that are, frankly, way beyond our current computers.
Wow. So the aha moment there is that life isn't just complex chemistry. It might be tapping into fundamental physics in ways we're only just starting to figure out.
Precisely. It opens up huge possibilities, for medicine, for new technologies inspired by biology.
And if people want the really technical details on, quantum entanglement in enzymes?
Their Substack probably goes there, yeah.
Yeah.
They usually offer that deeper level.
Okay, shifting gears quite a bit. This next one feels really important. April 18th. The kids are not all right. Reinfections, lingering shadows.
Yeah, this tackles something a lot of people are concerned about. The key thing here is how the story has changed. Initially, with things like COVID, the narrative for kids was often, oh, is mild, they bounce back.
Right, that was the common wisdom for a while.
But this episode highlights the emerging picture, which is, well, more complicated. We're seeing more about persistent issues, fatigue, that sort of brain fog, anxieties, other lingering symptoms, even after the initial infection seems over, especially with reinfections.
So the takeaway isn't just about the acute illness, but these potential long-term shadows, the effects of getting infected multiple times.
Exactly. It's focusing on those long-term consequences for children and teenagers and the, frankly, kind of terrifying implications if repeated exposure keeps happening. It stresses the need to really understand this better.
Definitely sounds crucial for parents and, well, everyone. Okay, let's jump back in time a bit. April 16th, witch hunts, then and now, true origins and myths.
Ah, yes. This one challenges what we think we know. Like so much common knowledge, the popular image of witch hunts, pointy hats, mass hysteria, burning stakes everywhere, is often based more on later myths than historical fact.
So it peels back the drama to look at what was really going on.
Probably, yeah. It likely explores the actual social pressures, the political motives, maybe economic factors, the specific religious context that led to these persecutions, often quite different from the simplified stories.
So the insight is to question those easy narratives and understand the kind of messier reality behind historical events, getting to the true origins, like the title says.
Exactly that. It encourages that critical look, digging beyond the surface.
Okay, now broadening out again. Geopolitics, April 14th. USA's global games, the emerging Cold War with China, Part 3. Part 3 suggests this is a big focus for them.
It seems to be. The core message here, I think, is that while we're often distracted by, domestic squabbles or social media drama,
Yeah, the daily noise.
a really significant global power struggle is taking shape, particularly in Asia. It argues that a new kind of Cold War is setting up between the U.S. and China, and the rules are being written by these huge economic and strategic forces, much bigger than, say, who tweeted what.
So the nudge here is to look past the immediate chaos and see the bigger strategic picture developing. Understand these larger forces shaping our future.
Precisely. It's about grasping that wider context, which might be easy to miss otherwise.
Makes sense. Okay, let's get a bit more internal. April 11th. Thinking without words. The silent symphony of thought we never knew we had.
Ooh, this sounds fascinating. It explores something we don't often consider. How much of our thinking, our actual experiencing of the world, happens before you put words to it?
Like pre-verbal thought?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
That immediate non-symbolic awareness, the raw experience, contrasted with how we then package it up using language.
Yeah.
It probably delves into consciousness itself beyond just the inner monologue.
Huh. So the potential aha moment is realizing how much thinking happens without language and maybe becoming more aware of those silent cognitive processes.
That seems to be the idea, appreciating the full richness of our mental lives, not just the bit we can easily talk about. And again, if you want theories of nonverbal cognition,
Substack.
got it.
Likely, yes.
Yeah.
All right, moving into relationships. April 8th. The silent crisis. How emotional detachment is killing relationships. Sounds pretty direct.
It does. The core insight seems pretty clear. Emotional unavailability is, well, relationship poison. The episode likely unpacks how that lack of connection, of vulnerability, of just being emotionally present really undermines intimacy and trust.
So it's not just about big fights or betrayals, but this quieter, maybe more insidious lack of emotional engagement.
Exactly. It highlights that active emotional participation and vulnerability are essential, not optional extras, for a healthy relationship.
That's a powerful point. Okay, back to history, but a different angle. April 6th. Female medieval scribes. A true story.
Yeah, this sounds like another one challenging the standard picture. We tend to imagine medieval manuscript creation, and we picture monks.
Right, men in monasteries diligently copying text.
But this episode digs into the true story, suggesting women played a much more significant role as scribes and illuminators than they're usually given credit for. It aims to uncover that hidden history.
So the insight is discovering these contributions, adding women back into that historical narrative of knowledge, preservation, and creation.
Precisely. It's about getting a fuller, more accurate picture of the medieval intellectual world by highlighting these often overlooked female figures.
I love that. Okay, here's one that might hit close to home for people who like farmers markets. April 2nd. Sweet betrayal. Our love for honey is silently killing the wild bees.
Oof, betrayal. That sounds provocative.
It does. The surprise here seems to be that our love for honey and the massive honeybee industry that supports it might actually be harming other bees.
How so? Aren't bees good? Well, yes, but honeybees aren't native to many places like North America. And huge colonies of managed honeybees can compete with native wild bees, the bumblebees, the mason bees, all sorts for pollen and nectar, potentially stressing their populations. Plus, they can sometimes spread diseases.
Wow, okay, so the aha is that this thing we see as purely positive supporting honeybees, buying honey might have these unseen negative consequences for biodiversity and the wild pollinators that ecosystems really depend on.
That seems to be the angle, yeah. A more complicated picture than the simple save the bees message often implies when it focuses only on honeybees.
Definitely makes you think. Okay, health again, March 29th. Why everything you think about body fat is incomplete.
Incomplete, okay,
Yeah.
intrigues me.
Right. The core idea presented here is that our decades-long focus on just BMI or overall weight might be missing a really key piece of the puzzle.
Which is?
Visceral fat. That's the fat stored deep inside around your organs. The episode, referencing a study, suggests that the proportion of this type of fat is a much better predictor of health, risks things like heart disease, diabetes, than just how much you weigh overall or the fat under your skin.
So it's not just how much fat, but where the fat is.
Exactly. So the big insight is shifting focus from just weight loss to understanding and potentially managing this specific type of internal fat for better long-term health.
Interesting. A more nuanced view of body composition.
Definitely. Okay, next one feels very relevant to us right now. March 25th. Why our brains are wired for narrative. The biological imperative of storytelling.
Yes. Very meta. The core point here is fundamental. Our brains didn't evolve to process spreadsheets. They evolved to understand the world through stories.
Makes sense instinctively.
Yeah, and they apparently cite a stat about us processing something like 34 gigabytes of data a day. Narrative provides the structure, the context, the emotional hooks that help us make sense of that flood and actually remember things.
So understanding this wiring explains why things like this deep dive or the Heliox episodes themselves work. Because information wrapped in a narrative structure just sticks better.
Precisely. It's not just entertainment. It's a fundamental cognitive tool for learning and meaning making.
Cool. Okay, two more. Looking at the really big picture. First, March 21st. Planetary solvency. The Earth's balance sheet is in the red.
Oof, that sounds grim.
Yeah.
Planetary solvency.
Yeah, the key insight is framing environmental crises, using the language of finance and risk. It argues, based on expert analysis, that we're essentially overdrawing Earth's resources, running ecological deficits, and that this isn't just an environmental problem, it's an economic one. The planet's balance sheet is unsustainable.
So the aha is connecting environmental degradation directly to economic risk and instability, using terms that maybe resonate more strongly in some circles. Like the planet is going bankrupt, that's the stark framing, yes. It argues these aren't separate issues. Ecological health is economic health in the long run.
Powerful framing. And finally, related perhaps, March 20th, the price of everything and the value of nothing. How market thinking conquered our world.
Based on Mark Carney's work, right? The former central banker.
That's the one. The core idea here is a critique of how market logic, thinking about everything in terms of price, efficiency, economic value, has spread from the economy into, well, almost every part of life.
Like social relations, education, health.
Exactly. And the potential downside explored is that this focus on price might be leading us to devalue things that have immense intrinsic value, but no obvious market tag community, nature, ethical considerations,
So the takeaway is a prompt to reflect on how much we let market thinking dominate and whether we're losing sight of other crucial human values in the process.
Precisely. A real what truly matters kind of question.
A lot to chew on there.
Definitely. So, as you can tell just from that selection, Heliox Season 3 really covers a huge range of topics, offering these deep, often counterintuitive perspectives. It feels like a genuine shortcut to getting informed on complex stuff.
Yeah, a really impressive breadth and depth.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned, if any specific episode sparks something, you know where to go for more.
The Heliox podcast on Substack, right? Always good to have that next layer available. So, thinking about all these different conversations about things that matter, that Heliox tackles from quantum biology to global politics to the nature of thought itself. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What previously unquestioned assumption, what deeply held belief might you start to re-examine in this rapidly changing world we're in?
That's a great question to leave people with. What framework are you maybe taking for granted? Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.